There we go.
Okay, let's go on the record. Good morning. Today is the 7th day of remote evidentiary hearings being held by the Energy Facilities Siting Board in dockets EFSB 20-01, D.P.U. 20-56, and D.P.U. 20-57. The petitioners in all three matters is Vineyard Wind, LLC. My name is Robert Shea. I am acting as the presiding officer in this proceeding for today. Donna Sharkey is temporarily unavailable. We are conducting these evidentiary hearings remotely using Zoom video conferencing. These hearings are being recorded and will be available for viewing on YouTube. Parties should be aware that the official transcript of the proceeding, however, is the transcript as transcribed by the reporter appointed by the Siting Board for that purpose, which today is Mr. Brock. The court stenographer is also participating remotely. He will transcribe everything said during this hearing. As we are all relying on the internet or telephones to participate, we could experience some technical difficulties, such as sounds from speakers, including potential background noise, video and audio issues, and potential delays. Therefore, it is imperative to speak slowly and clearly to allow a speaker to finish speaking before you begin speaking, and to pay attention to the video of the person speaking and to my video. I will raise my hand as a signal on my video if I need to interrupt the person currently speaking to ask them to stop. It's also helpful to mute your audio when you are not speaking to reduce any background noise. We appreciate everyone's cooperation and participation in this hearing. As you can see on your Zoom video screen, there are several other people from the Energy Facilities Siting Board who are from Siting Board staff who are participating on our virtual bench today. I'll ask them to raise their hand in their Zoom video when I identify them. Andrew Green, Director of the Siting Division, Joan Foster Evans, General Counsel of the Siting Division, Dean Hazel, Assistant Director of the Siting Division, Wayne Wong, an Energy Facilities Siting Analyst with the Siting Division, and Joanna Yellen, an Energy Facilities Siting Analyst. Next, I'd like to ask the council
Mr. Presiding Officer, can I also introduce our newest attorney on staff, Mr. Gibault, I'm sorry.
Oh, my apologies, Mr. Gibault. Yes, we have Andre Gibault is our newest attorney, joined us very recently, and thank you for bringing that to my attention. And you will probably, Mr. Gibault, you'll probably be seeing a lot of these people in your career at the Siting Board, and a lot of these people will be seeing Mr. Gibault. So I ask that council identify themselves for the record and state the name of the party for which they are appearing.
Good morning. My name is Adam Kahn, representing Vineyard Wind, and I'll pass it on to my colleagues.
Zachary Gerson with the law firm Foley Hoag on behalf of Vineyard Wind.
Aaron Lang with the law firm of Foley Hoag, also on behalf of Vineyard Wind.
I'll start for Eversource. David Rosenzweig from Keegan Worlin, appearing on behalf of Eversource Energy. Kathy?
Catherine Hewson, also from Keegan Worlin, also appearing on behalf of Eversource Energy, and also appearing on behalf of Eversource Energy, but not present, is Lisa Luftig.
Thank you. Can I ask counsel for Vineyard Wind to introduce the witnesses for today?
Yes, presiding officer. So the witnesses will be Jack Aruda, Chris Rodstrom, and Mark Bartlett. Mark Bartlett has not previously testified, so I believe he'll need to be sworn, and we'll have a brief direct examination.
If I might, I don't mean to interrupt that. Eversource did raise a procedural matter
Yes.
yesterday, and I think all parties that intended to respond did respond, and I just wanted to see if we could have resolution of that up front, given that some of our witnesses are standing by and holding their calendars for this afternoon or whatever may follow. So it would be very helpful to us, to the company, if we could have the staff's ruling on that motion, so we know where we are going forward.
Of course, yeah, that was my next point. Is, as Mr. Rosenzweig stated, Eversource filed a motion to defer certain testimony yesterday, and I believe the company and Ms. Johnston filed responses. If I understand this correctly, well, let me take this opportunity. None of the motions, there have been a few motions filed in the last 24 hours. None of them were served on me, which is not surprising because I'm not the hearing officer, but I'm the hearing officer for now. So just kind of ask counsel that in the future, please serve a, if you're filing a motion or anything relating to the hearing, please serve a copy on me at robert.j.shay@mass.gov. If you omit the J, it goes to someone else. There's another Robert Shay. But my understanding is that the parties are really not very far, not much in disagreement in this, in that testimony regarding the interconnection, I think there's no dispute that that can be deferred. Is that correct?
I believe that.
Yeah.
We agree, subject to the one minor modification that if either party wants to end a deferral, they may file a motion to that effect. But we do agree that deferral is appropriate now.
Okay, so deferral, at least to that, it's the motion to defer the testimony on interconnection is allowed with the proviso that any party that wishes to end the deferment may file a motion to do so. Now, the magnetic field, I understand that the witnesses on magnetic field do not need to be deferred. Is that correct, Mr. Rosenzweig?
We have agreement with counsel for Vineyard Wind on that matter, that our witness would be available to testify on Friday on that subject matter.
Okay, Mr. Khan?
I
Is
agree
that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so would anyone object if I treat the motion to defer testimony with respect to magnetic field as being withdrawn?
That effectively is, that's fine with us, yes.
Yeah, I don't want to, I don't want to put denied on the, I mean, I could, but I prefer not to, because denied looks like people didn't reach an agreement, and you did, which I'm grateful for. I wanted to address a procedural matter. Next, someone asked our general counsel, Ms. Joan Foster Evans, sent an email regarding the briefing schedule, and Ms. Evans replied. I just want to have, it's just a procedural matter, but nevertheless, I'd like to have it on the record. Ms. Evans replied that it is the presiding officer who issues the briefing schedule. No briefing schedule has been issued yet. The usual schedule, which is not to say that the present case will follow the usual schedule. The usual schedule is for initial briefs to be due 3 weeks after the last record request response is filed. And then reply briefs are usually due 2 weeks after that, although sometimes there are staggered briefs. So I just wanted to put that on the record. Zoning will be addressed on Friday, and therefore I don't believe we have a need for any hearing at all on Monday. Mr. Hazel, is that correct?
That's right. I was just looking at the witness schedule, and it looks like Vineyard Wind actually had Mr. Aruda, Rodstrom, and Barton as the witnesses for zoning, who are not currently listed on Friday, but have been generally available during hearings. So if the zoning witnesses are available on Friday, then Monday's hearing can be canceled.
Mr. Khan?
We can, if you have a moment, we can check availability. We also would like to check availability of our co-counsel Tad Hur, who is going to be managing the Vineyard Wind side of the zoning inquisition.
Would you like to go off the record and you can put your screens blank and do a conference call?
Thank you, we would.
Okay, let's go off the record.
While we're off the record, if I could ask if, once we're on the record, if you could give some guidance as to when Mr. Soderman would be testifying on Friday. EMF is, I guess, one of the issues, but if we know whether it will be in the morning or the afternoon, that would be helpful.
So currently, EMF will be the only issue on Friday, since traffic is being moved up to this morning, since Mr. Bartlett was graciously able to move his schedule around for us. So magnetic fields, part of the magnetic fields discussion involves the grid interconnect, which is inside of Eversource's right of way, which I imagine would be Mr. Soderman's, area of expertise. So I don't know exactly when we'll get into the grid interconnect, but I would imagine that magnetic fields will just kind of progress through the morning, and depending on the level of interest from interveners, might last, I don't know, throughout the day, I suppose.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
And is zoning being addressed on Friday also?
Oh, my mistake. Yeah. Zoning, I think our staff questions might be a little shorter on zoning. So we should be able to just slot that topic in after magnetic fields.
Depending on the availability of the zoning witnesses, if it's really short, maybe we slot it in before, just a suggestion.
Sure.
Up to you, Dean, and whichever way works out.
Yeah.
Bob, when we go back on the record, there was one more thing we wanted to say about the motion to defer, and I just want to, I'll be glad to say it. I will, just give me time, please.
On the motion to defer, yes, of course.
We had one more piece we wanted to say, and I can go ahead and say it if you'd like.
Okay. Oh, that was if the parties have not filed the commercial arrangement by 8/20, then they must file a joint status report. I can.
Yeah, I'd like that. You could say that. I'd like it on the record, please. Yeah.
Yes, of course.
And then also at the very end, give Dean an opportunity to kind of restate the schedule. I mean, we'll issue it in writing, but also just recap the whole schedule, what's left of this week and what's happening, because we just have a lot of moving pieces right now, and I want to make sure that it's clear.
Okay, that sounds like a great idea. Dean,
clarity. There we go. Clarity.
Are you on board with this? 2 thumbs up. Okay.
Yeah.
Who would have thought in March of last year, who would have thought we'd still be working remotely in August of this year?
Well, if we remember March of last year, we didn't think we'd be working remotely March of August of last year.
Yeah, no, we thought it would be quick.
Yeah. We're all not getting younger. If they have trouble reaching people, perhaps we can do this during a break, this checking on schedules, but see how let's see how they do. I mean, you've already asked them, so.
Hard to reel them back in now that we set them off.
Hey, they're getting an answer, that's fine.
Shall we go to our break slide in the interim?
Sure.
Bob, you're also going to get to Ms. Johnson's motion also, right, before we go, when we go on the record, before we
Yes.
get to direct examination.
That's right, yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mr. Shea, we're prepared to respond
Okay,
when you go back on the record.
all right. Let me just wait till, just wait a moment. Some people are still not on the Zoom. I don't want to go back on the record while Mr. Rosenzweig and Ms. Cuthin are still not participating. There she is. There's Ms. Cuthin. Kathy, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm here.
Okay, and Mr. Rosenzweig. Let's go back on the record. Mr. Khan, you had something to say.
Yes, thank you. We have substantially ascertained the availability of the witnesses. I'll follow up on that in a second. For doing zoning on Friday, October 6th, and we believe we can accommodate that change. Mr. Rodstrom is certainly available. We believe Mr. Barton is available, but because he's otherwise testifying on the EMF panel, so we know he's there for the day. I just haven't been able to reach him. And our co-counsel, Tad Hoyer, is available simply with a hard stop at 4:45 p.m.
Okay.
And that's August 6th.
Correct.
One thing that I'd like to get on the record, when we were talking about the motion, Eversource's motion to defer testimony, there's a condition to the extent that it's granted, and that's we want either party, we want the parties to file the commercial arrangement, and if they haven't filed the commercial arrangement by August 20th, which is a Friday, then the parties must file a joint status report regarding the negotiations.
And if I could just, I'm sorry, just one clarification, Mr. Shea. And the parties we're talking about, just Vineyard Wind and Eversource, I believe, as they're the only parties to the commercial arrangement, need to file a status report by August 20th of the negotiations toward the commercial arrangement.
Now, we received a motion, I believe this morning, Ms. Johnson, who's an intervener, but she's not in on this call. She filed a motion to add the record in Vineyard Wind 1 to the record in this case. And she also wanted some information added about sound levels. So rather than respond to that now, can I ask that any responses be in writing and be submitted by Tuesday of next week, which would be August 10th? Is that acceptable to Keegan Worland?
Yes.
I don't want to keep you working all weekend if you need another day, but all right, that would be very nice. Then we could get our responses. If Keegan Worland has anything to say on the record now, also this would be a time to say it if you want to. I don't think.
No.
No. Okay.
Not this time.
Thank you. All right.
Presiding officer.
Yes,
So I would just say that Vineyard Wind, we can also meet that schedule. I do expect that we will file a response.
yes, okay. I'm sorry, I should have asked both council, Vineyard Wind and Eversource. And can I ask then now, as we're finishing up our procedural matters, Mr. Hazel, do you want to recap our schedule?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And staff do plan to issue this in writing with a revised schedule today, just so that we're all on the same page. Today, we're going to cover the onshore traffic impacts associated with construction for the first part of the day. After that, we don't have any remaining scheduled topics for Wednesday, so we should have a shorter day today. On Friday, we're going to cover magnetic fields of the Vineyard Wind's cable and the grid interconnection and the substation. We're also going to cover zoning to the extent that staff have questions on Vineyard Wind's zoning petitions. Since zoning will be covered on Friday, there's no longer any need for hearings on Monday, August 9. So those will be canceled, and pending the commercial arrangement between Vineyard Wind and Eversource, staff will have to schedule subsequent hearings when we have more information.
Okay, and then with respect, pardon me if you said this, but with respect to Friday, Mr. Hazel, do you know which subject should go first, zoning or magnetic fields?
We could run zoning first thing if that would be easier for Mr. Hewer's schedule, since he may not need to be present for the entire day. Would that be helpful to the company?
It would be.
Okay, we'll plan to start with zoning then, and then move on to magnetic fields, which will be a more substantial topic.
Okay. If there's no other matters, I'd like to swear Mr. Bartlett. Mr. Bartlett, can I ask you to turn off your mute button? Thank you. Will you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear that the testimony that you will give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, let the record reflect that Mr. Bartlett has been sworn. The questioner, our first topic today is traffic impacts, and the questioner is Joanna Yellen. So I will yield the floor to Ms. Yellen.
Mr. Shea.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Lang.
Apologies, presiding officer. We were planning on doing just a brief direct examination of Mr.
Bartlett. Excuse me. Please do your direct examination, Mr. Bartlett.
Thanks, and I promise it'll be quick. Mr. Bartlett, could you please state your name and business address for the record?
It's Mark S. or Stephen Bartlett, and my business address is in Quincy. It's 400 Crown Colony, Suite 200.
And by whom are you employed, and in what capacity?
It's Stantec Consulting Services. I'm a senior associate. And
apologies.
Excuse me, Mr. Brock, are you having trouble hearing anyone? Mr. Brock?
Yes, I'm having trouble hearing Mr. Bartlett. He's going in and out.
Okay. Good. Mr. Lang, could I ask you to resume to go over these questions again? And Mr. Bartlett, I guess there's a bit of a problem, so you may have to speak more loudly than usual.
All right.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
No problem. No problem.
And that sounds good. I'll start at the beginning. So Mr. Bartlett, if you could please state your name and business address for the record.
It's Mark Stephen Bartlett. My business address is 400 Crown Colony Plaza, and that's in Quincy, Mass. It's Suite 200 at that address.
Thanks. And by whom are you employed, and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Stantec Consulting Services, Inc. My title with them is Senior Associate.
And on whose behalf are you testifying today in this proceeding?
On behalf of Vineyard Wind.
And was your resume submitted as attachment 11 to the witness list that Vineyard Wind submitted in this proceeding?
Yes.
And have there been any material changes to your resume since it was submitted?
No material changes.
And did you participate in the preparation of Vineyard Wind's submissions in this proceeding, including information request responses that bear your name as a responsible witness?
That's correct.
And were those information request responses that bear your name prepared by you or under your supervision?
Yes.
And do you have any changes to those materials at this time?
I do not.
And do you adopt those materials as your testimony in this proceeding?
Yes, I do.
Thank you very much. Presiding officer, the witnesses are available for cross-examination.
Thank you, Mr. Lang. Ms. Yellen, I yield the floor to you.
Before we begin the cross-examination, can I just interject a technical suggestion? I'm still having some difficulty hearing Mr. Bartlett consistently. And if we could pause for a moment, or maybe go off the record, we can just try an adjustment of his microphone setting to see if we can boost his audibility.
Let's go off the record.
Mr. Bartlett, if you go to the bottom left of your screen where you see the microphone icon,
yeah,
and you click the up arrow where you'll see audio settings.
Correct.
Okay, so if you would move the slider under the microphone portion of the settings panel and slide that volume level for microphone higher, and that may help boost your sound. And give it a good goose.
Well, it's up at the max level. I've got it set on automatically adjust microphone volume.
Usually that's what we turn off, the automatic.
Try going manual.
Okay, yeah, I've turned off the automatic, and it's already away to the right. So,
well, we're still having some difficulty, I have to say. Is there anything you can do to bring the mic closer to where you're speaking, or any other physical adjustment?
Yeah.
Maybe headphones?
I do have headphones, yeah.
With a microphone?
Yes. Yep.
That would help. Sorry we didn't do this earlier on. I apologize.
Oh, yeah. My apologies. Get this. All right, hello?
I think we hear you.
Okay, I can hear you fine. Is this a better input for you?
Yeah, it is.
Excellent. Good.
I'm glad you don't have to stand to use the headset.
No. Are there any other settings that I need to adjust here, or you think we're all set?
I think that's good. We can resume when Mr. Shea is ready.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark.
No problem.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. I appreciate that. It is much more easy. Let's go on the record. And again, Ms. Yellen has some questions regarding traffic.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. Good morning, everyone. Please refer to EFSB-T-14. We touched upon night work, I believe, in hearings already, but I'd like to focus my question this morning more related to traffic, with the focus of traffic. So the company states that night work is only necessary where the duct bank would cross the busy road. Please state the expectation for which roadway crossings would constitute a busy road and thus require night work.
So the busiest road that this route will cross is Route 28, which is a Mass DOT highway. And in prior discussions with Mass DOT, and not for Vineyard Wind 2, but for Vineyard Wind 1, they typically have asked that work be done at night. And that's typical of Mass DOT.
Sorry, they've typically asked what?
To have night work when crossing their state highway.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. Is there, you mentioned that 128 is the busiest road, the busiest roadway crossing. What is there, what is the next busiest road? And would that also constitute night work, require night work?
That to answer that question really is, would be quite speculative at this point. I believe that Vineyard Wind would want to defer to the local police and the local D.P.U, particularly the police, for their recommendations on any night work that might occur on their roads. I mean, we could speculate, or, you know, it's possible that, you know, you could get some night work at intersections, because there are a couple of intersections that we're involved in. But at this point in time, we don't anticipate that.
Okay. Well, then let's go back to the Route 128 roadway crossing. How many periods of night work would that? Did somebody need something?
Mrs. Yellen, if I could just clarify, I believe we're referring to Route 28, and I thought I may have heard a 128 reference.
Thank you. I'm always, Route 128 is just more familiar to me, but not in the record. Thank you for correcting me. The Route 28 crossing. About how many periods of night work would that roadway crossing require?
The proposed traffic management for crossing Route 28 is actually noted on the Stantec design plans that are of record. I believe I'd have to refer to that figure to be precise, but there were several phases where we're crossing Route 28. It's not done in one day. It's done, I believe, in 4 days. And so, but I would refer you to, and I would ask our attorneys at Foley Hoag to refer to the right figure, but it's part of the Stantec design set. Actually, several drawings that relate to the Route 28 crossing.
Okay. Well, I can find that reference as well. If the references comes up, if you're able to come up with it, that would be helpful, at least just for the record. But we can.
Ms. Yan, if you would give us just a couple minutes, we could probably get that citation for you. If you want to move on, we can do that, but we could provide that citation within a few minutes.
Mr. Gerson, I could provide that if you'd like now, I believe so.
Less than a few minutes. Thank you, Mr. Rodstrom.
Yeah, it's the exhibit Vineyard Wind 7, the draft EIR attachment E engineering plans, and then sheets 18 and 19, which have the traffic management plan details.
Thank you.
Yeah, the traffic management details are on those sheets that Mr. Rodstrom's referring to. But the actual layout for crossing of Falmouth. Hello? Yeah, the actual layout for crossing of Falmouth Road or Route 28 is on sheets 14 through 17.
Okay, thank you.
So 14 through what?
Sheets 14 through 17 of that set.
Thank you.
Yep.
And you know, if you refer to table 10-2 of the DEIR, and which is the traffic management measures table, who reviews and approves the traffic management measures proposed in this table?
Well, ultimately, the town of Barnstable needs to review this. Specifically, it would be the police department and the Department of Public Works. Of course, this has been reviewed internally by Stantec, and it's been reviewed by Vineyard Wind and their partners. But a more detailed or more specific TMP or traffic management plan will be prepared by the contractor. And that will be the ultimate document as they head into construction.
I saw that the traffic management plan would require also a review by the Barnstable Police Department. I know you mentioned the town of Barnstable, but does the traffic management plan actually require approval from the police department?
I guess I'd defer to Jack or Chris on that in terms of their relationship with their host community agreement.
Yeah, I can add to that. So in a practical matter, yes, the police department would have to approve our traffic management plan. We can propose the plan as Mr. Bartlett explained from our contractor, but without the local police department agreement with the plan, it's really hard to execute. So you need their support. They will provide the traffic details for the execution of the works. So it absolutely would need the police department and the DPW and other emergency response agencies within the town to review and comment on it also.
Thank you. So is it correct to say that the Barnstable Police Department is reviewing the traffic management plan from a coordinating capacity?
Yes, I would say that's a fair statement, because one of the things we need to take into account here is we can put together Vineyard Wind, Stantec, and others a traffic management plan based on our project and our expectations of execution timelines. But the police department and the other agencies within the town have to take into account all the other activities going on simultaneously within the town at that given time. So they will look at the bigger picture as to what other impacts in the town could have on our work or our work on other activities in the town. So it's more of a larger view of the overall activities at a given time.
Okay, thank you.
I would just add to that it's a living document, this traffic management plan. It's literally reviewed every day. And they have to, because conditions change, and they have to be totally on top of how the town feels about it.
Yes, and you mentioned that ultimately the contractor will be the one to develop the final traffic management plan. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I understand that hasn't been finalized yet. However, have there been updates related to the traffic management plan since the company has submitted it in the DEIR and so on?
I don't believe there have been. I know Stantec hasn't revised it, so.
Has the company determined the location of the duct banks? Is that final?
It's pretty final. It's subject to change. Again, as we go into final design, not us, but the EPC contractor that Stantec, I'm sorry, that Vineyard Wind will select, they will be making final design plans, and they may make some adjustments, but we believe that the layout that you have is very representative of what the path will be.
And just to add to Mr. Bartlett's comments, based on the information available to us now, this is the alignment that would be proposed. But as stated, as you get further into the detailed design and you perform some other more detailed subsurface surveys, you may find conflicting utilities that weren't maybe publicly available in the early stages of the design. And you may also run into, or not run into, but have interface with other projects that might be scheduled or to take place, in which you have to work collaboratively together and maybe adjust some of the alignment to be able to accommodate other utilities within the roadway right of way.
Okay. Do any of my colleagues have any questions about that aspect of the traffic management plan? How, any other questions?
I have a few questions about the traffic management plan sheets that were submitted in attachment E to the draft EIR. Specifically, I'm looking at sheets 18 and 19. Can you just give me an overview of how sheets 18 and 19 are different from sheets 14 to 17?
Oh, absolutely. It's a good question. I mean, basically, sheets 18 and 19 provide the details that are standard highway traffic control details and methodology for controlling traffic. For example, directing traffic into one lane with the police detail, so forth. Proper placement of warning signs. Proper notices to the vehicle operators. So 18 and 19 are your details on how signage and barriers and controls are laid out in the field. Sheets 14 and 15 provide, they basically drill down a little deeper in terms of just the site-specific crossing of Route 28 or Falmouth Road. And if you look at 14, it shows the work starting on the south side of Falmouth Road. And that's the first phase of work. And it has indications on that drawing of where the warning signs would be placed and the types of signs that would be used. But if there was any question on that, you would go back to the details on what the signage looks like. As you look at sheet 15, now you're getting into the middle of the road. There's a different traffic diversion pattern. There's a different phase of work that has to occur there, and so forth. Sheet 16, you're moving across into the, I guess it's the westbound lane of Falmouth Road, and now your traffic diversion patterns are different, and so forth. So it's really a different effort altogether. Sheet 14 is really 14, 15, 16, and 17 are really intended to be used in discussions with Mass DOT down the road. And they will have comments and input on this, no doubt. But our traffic engineers have laid this out as expecting Mass DOT would be happy with this.
So for most of the in-street construction where the company's installing a duct bank or a splice vault, Do I understand correctly that sheets 18 and 19 just kind of like lay out the general principles for controlling traffic, and then 14 through 17 address, you know, a specific, more complicated intersection in greater detail?
That's absolutely correct. Yeah.
Are there any other locations along the on-street route where the company would develop a more specific or detailed traffic management plan layout like you have for crossing Falmouth Road?
At this time, there isn't any expected. That's not to say that in discussions with the town of Barnstable and the police department, if they ask for a specific plan for handling an intersection, it can certainly be prepared by the contractor. And it wouldn't be surprising to me if a contractor was asked to prepare specific plans for certain crossings. You know, where, for example, where you're coming up Craigville Beach Road, you're meeting Main Street in South Main. At that intersection, they may ask for a specific sequencing plan of how that would be done and how traffic will be handled and how detours might be brought into play and so forth.
Which sheet is that intersection on that you think it sounds like might be the next most likely?
Well, yeah, I was just tossing that out as an example, and it's not meant to be an opinion based on in-depth study. But I'm just pointing out that, let's see, that would probably be sheet 4.
Okay.
At sheet 4, there's South Main and is crossing Main. It's actually coming into the intersection of there are 4 streets there.
Mm-hmm.
And we're actually, you know, going to be installing duct bank and vaults at that intersection. So the good news is there's lots of room to work in that intersection, but the challenge is to make sure we maintain traffic flow through those streets.
When the company is selecting locations for splice faults, how much flexibility does the company have to sort of adjust the location of a splice fault, you know, back and forth along the line? Like, is there sort of a tolerance range for where the splice faults can be put?
Without a doubt, and I would defer to Jack Arruda on this, but my sense is it's in the range of 100, 200 feet or more, depending on what the need.
Yeah, I would concur, Mr. Bartlett, that there is a fair amount of leeway, because ultimately the vaults, you'll decide on the final vault locations in collaboration with the cable vendor also, because the vault distances or spacing between the vaults is driven by multiple inputs, one being the maximum length at which they can pull a cable based on cable pulling tensions, and then to your point about the sensitivity in the area where they may determine you could pull a cable, as an example, 2,500 feet, but that 2,500 feet lands in front of a sensitive area. So then you would probably move, you wouldn't want to install the vault there, you would adjust that probably to something less than 2,500 to get you in a more desirable area to actually install the vaults that has the minimal impact on the roadways and the neighbors. So there is a fair amount of flexibility in the vault location, but it does take multiple inputs from both the civil design engineers, contractor, and the cable supplier.
It seemed like Mr. Bartlett was maybe indicating that the one advantage of the vault location 3A and 3B is that there's more room to work because of the intersection. Are these splice vaults in a desirable location from like a work area setup perspective, or I'm trying to determine if it's a good idea to put the splice vaults kind of sort of inside of this intersection at Main Street and South Main Street.
Well, yeah, I want to correct you a little bit with respect that these vaults are actually not right in the middle of the intersection. They're skewed to the Main Street side of it. We really wouldn't want to put it right in the middle of the intersection. That would not be good for future maintenance. But the location of vaults it's a combination of factors. It's how much room is available, what other utilities are in the way. You know, those types of issues come into play. And as Jack Aruda pointed out, Mr. Aruda said, there's a maximum pulley length on the cable. So we have to pay attention to how far apart the vaults are spaced. And all of those factors come into play. But in this instance, you know, if we were to slide this 100 feet further to the north or to the right, and the police department said, hey, could you do that? I believe the contractor could accommodate that. But we selected what we thought were the best locations.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but if you were traveling east on South Main Street and you wanted to turn north onto Main Street, it looks like the location of Vault 3A would be right smack in that turning lane. Am I not reading the map correctly, or are the splice vaults not in the way of
Well, if you're right. I mean, if you're traveling, I guess I'm trying to see the direction. I guess if you're traveling south on Main Street and taking a right onto South Main, then you're crossing vaults. But if you're traveling east on South Main and heading across, you're not crossing vaults. And if you're turning north onto Main, you're turning around to Traffic Island. And again, you're not crossing into a vault area.
Okay.
And I might add that when you install the vaults, you will install one vault at a time. So you wouldn't necessarily open the whole road up to be able to accommodate both vaults being installed at the same time. You would install one vault, and then you'd reestablish the roadway and then install the second vault. That's why they're in that staggered position as they are.
Yep.
So while it may look like a big impact, Mr. Hazel, when you look at them in their totality, they would be done individually.
Oh, that's a helpful clarification. Thank you. Are there any locations along the onshore route where the company thinks or expects that a full road closure and detour would be required? Or could onshore construction be completed with just lane closures?
I'm going, Mr. Hazel, I'll refer you to table 10.2, which was mentioned in prior question.
Okay.
And I believe if any detours were recommended, they've been stated on that table. So for example, we call for some local detours in actually many places. As you look at the TMP action plan column and you look at these individual stages or locations, we're calling for quite a few local detours. I might add that in prior discussions with the Barnstable Police, knowing how they like to operate and their thinking on these issues is they really do prefer detours to excessive one-way streets. If they can direct traffic around a construction area, they greatly prefer that. So we've tried to accommodate that as best we can.
Okay, thank you for the reference to table 10.2. I'm all set for now, Miss Yellen.
Regarding parking prohibitions during construction, have there been any updates related to parking prohibitions?
Well, Jack or Chris, are you aware of any updates on those?
I'm not aware of parking prohibitions at this point in time for the project, unless others have had discussions.
You know, in our recent discussions with the town about other aspects of the onshore route, the additional parking prohibitions have not been raised by the town.
Okay, but there are, yeah, the parking prohibitions that do, can the company just briefly elaborate on where the existing parking prohibitions are?
My understanding that along the route, parking is generally prohibited along the entire route. Now, that's not to say there aren't private parking lots as you pull off of Main Street and so forth, but I don't believe parking is allowed on the side of the street.
Mm.
And contractors, of course, would not be parking there.
Can you elaborate on how contractors would get to and from the job site each day?
I believe it was described in the DEIR. The procedure is to have contractors, the crew, and they may have one or two crews operating in any given day, would park in an off-site location that's acceptable to Vineyard Wind, acceptable to the town. They would be shuttled to the project site.
And is it the contractor's responsibility to identify an acceptable off-site location?
That'll be his responsibility ultimately as part of his design and consultation with Vineyard Wind, consultation with the town.
Okay, so any sort of off-site muster area or off-site parking for the contractors, Vineyard Wind would have some say, I guess, in reviewing that location and whether it's acceptable to the company, and then a final sign off would be from the town. Did I understand that correctly?
I'll defer to Jack or Chris on this, but that's my understanding, is that this is not going to be a random process. They want this to be very specific. They want to have a plan and a plan of action. And this is all part of the traffic management plan that we talked about before.
I would agree, and largely the parking areas that would be utilized a lot of times would be consistent with the staging areas that the contractors have also identified and that the projects had approved in order to stage some of their equipment during the off hours and supplies. So that would mainly be the concept of the parking areas.
Okay. Moving on a little bit from parking, going into talking about lane closures for microtunneling. Just for my own knowledge, can the company describe what microtunneling is?
Be happy to. Well, microtunneling is as you know, is proposed at the crossing of the Centerville River, and it's not to be confused with HDD, or horizontal directional drilling. It's similar, but it's not the same. Microtunneling is it doesn't. Let's put it this way: it's a fairly straightforward, and I literally mean straight, process where the micro tunnel doesn't have to be as deep as an HDD operation. And as you're advancing a casing, which is what's going to contain the ducts, you're literally tunneling out through the casing. And so you're pushing a casing forward at the same time you're removing soil. As the casing moves forward, you're removing soil back through the casing, so that you're working from one defined location, which is the, we'll call it the jacking pit or the launching pit, and you go to a receiving pit. I don't know if that's descriptive enough for you, but
Thank you. That helps me visualize a bit more of
Okay.
what microtunneling is. And when you have lane closures for the microtunneling, how long do you expect those to last?
the microtunneling effort, from the time they start by installing the launching area or the jacking pit, and by the time they finish the jacking and receiving pits, and then proceed with the actual microtunneling effort. I'm just checking. I believe it was around 5 weeks was the total amount of time it would take. 4 to 5 weeks from the time they start setup to the time that they can pack it up and move on.
Thank you. And if that's 5 weeks, is the lanes, both lanes are completely closed for 5 weeks, or is it going to be one side of the street and having the other side of the street be open?
Well, I think in the worst case is just one lane. I believe while they're actually doing the micro tunneling, after they've got the jacking and receiving pits completed, they should be able to stay off the road and to allow traffic to flow pretty freely there. I would, again, all these types of comments, I defer to the final EPC contractor and his proposed approach, but we don't anticipate a major closure or any closure of Craigville Beach Road at all during the micro tunneling. If you notice on the design plan, Ms. Yellen, if you look at, or just even if you look at, let's see, it's sheet 4 of that design plan set that we've been talking about. You'll see that the pathway, the start of the micro tunneling is on some land that Vineyard Wind is acquiring. And the benefit of acquiring that parcel is they can set up and work from that parcel, go under the Centerville River and stay out of the road.
Okay.
That was one of the reasons that the micro tunnel was selected as the preferred solution, was that it allowed the traffic to flow still on Craigville Beach Road over the bridge and up to the Main Street area, because we wouldn't have to close the complete road down.
Since the micro tunneling operation from start to finish, will take longer than splice vaults or duct banks in a given location, does the company plan to develop one of the more detailed traffic management plans, like for Falmouth Road that we talked about earlier?
Well, it's possible. I don't know, Jack, if you've had any thoughts, talk to your possible contractors. I mean, it's possible that the town might like to see a detailed traffic plan. The real traffic impacts, Mr. Hazel, will occur when they're building the jacking pit and the receiving pit, and they have to have some heavy equipment mobilized to the site, and there may be some temporary closure of one lane for that purpose. But I don't think there's any intent to shut down that road entirely at all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I have a few more questions. I think we might be able to get through them and without taking a morning break, but I would like my colleagues to make that decision. I have a question with several sub-questions. Are we able to get through that without taking the morning break?
I think it would be fine if you continue questioning Ms. Yellen, and then once you're done with this line of questioning, we can take a break. Thank you.
Sure. Ms. Yellen, if I could, before moving on, I just did want to clarify one point about the parking bans issue. And if, when you travel the roadways from the landfall to the Vineyard Wind substation, you'll see that there, in many locations, there are posted no parking signs. And as was suggested earlier, that the roadways themselves do not generally have a very wide shoulder, and there's just no on-street parking for that entire transmission route, with a couple of minor exceptions, so that we do not expect that there will be any kind of additional no parking prohibitions as part of the project. That was more, I think, in reference to the current conditions and current town parking rules along the route, which generally prohibit on-street parking along the main roadways of the transmission route.
Thank you.
Could I ask a quick clarifying question? Does the shuttle, the parking offsite with shuttling in of workers also apply to the landfall site construction? Generally, would it?
I think the landfall, and I'll defer to Mr. Bartlett and Aruda, but the landfall site construction, as we know, is occurring within a large town-owned beach parking lot, and there is a defined work zone in that parking lot where it will be enclosed and the work will take place. But that is situated within a much larger area of beach parking that could be available for parking for the workers coming to the day. So we haven't gotten into that level of detail of discussions with the town, but given the time of year the construction would take place and the very extensive area of parking at that location, I would expect there could be some of that use accommodated there and avoid the type of shuttling we may need at other points along the transmission route.
Thank you, Mr. Rodstrom. And the company, and I understand that this might all depend on the EPC contractor selected, but does the company expect any road closures with regard to construction at the landfall site?
Don't believe so.
There are not anticipated road closures associated with the landfall site at this time.
Thank you. Ms. Yellen?
If I may, I do just want to remind the panel that Mr. Bartlett is with us until noon today, as we discussed yesterday. So the discussion of breaks, would like you to make sure that you do take that into consideration.
Certainly. I have a few questions related to traffic impacts associated with bringing in the fill to level the substation. What is the route that dump trucks would follow to bring fill into the site?
I'm just going to refer to that substation site plan for a second. Hold on. Okay. So there are several options for getting access to the site, but one of the nice features about this site location, south of Route 6 and west of Route 132 or INO Road, is that you get to this site through a service road, and the service road has access to both Route 6, coming off Route 6, but also to Route 132. So the preference, I believe, will be for any trucking of sand and gravel or fill to be limited to the limited access highways of Route 6 and the major corridor of Route 132 going directly to the site through the service road. It's also possible that they might develop a route in coordination with the town that would be different than that, perhaps coming through Chute Flying Hill Road, but I tend to think that the town and Vineyard Wind will prefer to have that trucking more direct coming off Route 6 and 132 to and from the site. I, as always, defer to Jack and Chris if they have any update from the company's thinking on that.
I would add to that just for any access to the proposed substation site from Route 6 headed eastbound, that there is a separate exit directly onto Chute Flying Hill Road that is almost directly across from the substation site, so that to the degree that any access for construction material or other needs coming to the site could go almost directly from Route 6 directly to the site. So that's, I think, in addition to what Mr. Bartlett was saying, another very good feature of the location. And I would note that the goal is to actually eliminate the need for any fill material that would be needed to be brought on site.
For your reference, Ms. Yellen, if you look at sheet, I believe it's sheet 12 of that set of drawings, you will actually see a limited part of Route 6, but you'll see that access off of Route 6 that Chris Rodstrom's referring to.
Okay. When talking about the fill, where is the fill coming from? Is it coming from a source on the Cape near the substation site? Can I have some clarity on that, please?
Well, I could start that. As I mentioned, I think the goal is to eliminate the need for fill. But if there was a need for fill, it would most likely be at a location that is, as close as possible to the site. We are aware there may be some opportunities for some other projects planned for the Cape in the general mid-Cape vicinity. So I think that would be the first location we would look, and our understanding in looking into that matter a little bit is that procuring that fill material, if needed, would not be too challenging and could be done generally in this Cape area.
What do you mean by other projects? How do these other projects relate to fill for the substation site?
They're entirely unrelated to the project, but there are some civil projects that are kind of in the planning stages that may be generating fill that could be possibly utilized. We haven't entered in any kind of significant investigation or discussion, but I think when we were just looking at fill and quantifying that and sourcing it, the initial indications were that there would be varying options.
And if the company needed to export fill from the site, depending on the final cut and fill balance of the property, would trucks taking fill away from the substation follow a similar path of directly accessing Route 6?
Well, the exit ramp that I mentioned that exits almost directly across from the substation site, that's a one-way exit off of the Route 6 eastbound highway. So any trucks departing the substation site would follow the path that Mr. Bartlett was describing before, either on Service Road or Chute Flying Hill Road, possibly onto Route 132 and then onto Route 6 at that location.
Should the company,
Go ahead, Ms. Yellen.
Should the company determine that fill is necessary, will the trucks be delivering it during the construction hours?
Yeah, I don't anticipate there'd be a need to do any deliveries beyond regular construction hours, but I ask Mr. Bartlett to expand on that if there's anything in addition.
Most trucking operations will occur during the day. I can't, unless there was some specific requirement by the town of Barnstable to restrict truck deliveries at night, which would really be quite unusual. I would expect all of the trucking to be during working construction hours, during working weekdays.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And again, I understand that the company does not right now intend to use fill, but how I'm just trying to understand how if it does intend to ultimately determine to bring fill into the site, you're saying that the location of where the company would retrieve the fill is very close to the substation. Is that correct?
Yeah, maybe I could clarify. What I intended to say was that there are potential sources of fill that would correspond with the schedule for the project that may be available in the Cape Cod region. So I think that likely be a goal is to utilize those sources if the schedule and arrangements can be made. But we haven't yet identified the specific sources, and hopefully will not need to.
Yeah, I understand. And how many does the company have an idea of how many traffic trips it would need to bring the amount of fill that's needed for the site into the site? How many trips that might take if the company determined that they did need to bring fill into the site?
Chris, do you remember the number on that? I know that it depended on the quantity.
Yeah, and I believe there was an information request also about that. I'm just give me one moment. I'll just.
Ms. Yellen, the number has shifted. There's been a reduction, I believe, in the quantity.
Yes, I believe the information request T36 addressed your question, Ms. Yellen. I think if it's for the design that was presented in the DEIR, the estimated delivery of 56,000 cubic yards of fill would require approximately 3,120 truck trips. It would kind of for a standard size dump truck.
Thank you.
And Mr. Rodstrom, in Exhibit 10, Exhibit VW 10, which contemplates a full 10-foot reduction in elevation for the substation design, there's sort of there's a sentence that's a little complex. It says a full 10-foot reduction would result in the need to export soils equivalent to approximately 2/3 the volume of fill the company would need to import for the original site design. I think I follow that, but could you just walk me through it in the context of T-36 that you just explained?
Yeah, I think that was using kind of the estimate of for the design included in the DEIR and siting board petition with the amount of imported fill that would be required to reduce the height of the finished grade of this substation. It would reduce the imported fill needed to somewhere in the order of 36,000 cubic yards. Let me just make sure.
So can you provide me with the difference? How much fill would the company need to export if the volume was reduced by 10 feet? Excuse me, if the elevation were reduced by 10 feet?
Mr. Hazel, are you usually asking about would there be imported fill for the new design? I may have gotten confused. I do apologize.
I'd like to know the volume of fill that would need to be exported from the site. I think it's implicit from the company's answers, but just so that it's stated on the record from the company how much fill would need to be exported.
I think I understand. So if I could restate, if the question is how much material would need to be exported from the site with the redesign of the substation and reducing the finished grade by 10 feet, the answer would be 0, that there would be no material. Well, actually, I would say Mr. Bartlett or Ruta can help, but in general, the material on site would be regraded and used, and there would be little to no material that would have to be exported. But that's assuming clean fill that and material that is used on site. I think that would be the goal.
I don't think that's quite consistent with what's explained in VW 10. From reading VW 10, it looks like if the finished grade is reduced by 10 feet, the company would need to export approximately 1/3 of 56,000 cubic yards. So I guess I'm capable of doing division, but I was just asking the company to state what the 1/3 of 56,000 would be.
Yes, I think I have got myself tangled up here for a second.
Maybe it would be easier if we address this by a record request, just so that we avoid the possibility of further tripping over ourselves.
Mr. Hazel, I might suggest we could do it as a record request, but if we could just have a moment off the record. I think the witness is trying to be very careful in that if he's going to give you a number, he wants to, make sure he gets it right. And the VW 10 is a little generalized. So if we could just have a moment to make sure we get you the right answer, we might be able to do that on the transcript.
Can I go off the record? Mr. Hazel, what would you like to do?
That's fine. Oh, we can go off the record.
Why don't we go off the record? Off the record, and then actually, if the siting board team will stay on, we can discuss something. If they stay on this.
Mr. Shea, I would like to say that this is still being recorded, but if it's okay to talk.
Yeah, I know. I was just wondering, it is still being recorded. You're right. I'm just wondering about timing. Mr. Bartlett, you're here through noon. Is that correct?
Right. That's correct. Yep.
Yeah, we should be able to get you out by 12, and just want to make sure we're all on the same page with the substation cut and fill.
Let's take 2-3 minutes. We can get back. If we don't have it for you, you can give us that record request, or if we don't satisfy. Sound
Thanks,
good?
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.
I have a quick question. Mr. Brock, are you doing okay?
I don't really know what you mean.
Do you need a break?
Well, we're taking 2 minutes right now. That'll be fine.
Okay,
Thank
sorry.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you for that.
Mr. Bartlett. You mentioned what I heard as INO Road. Can you tell me what that is? Your microphone is not on if you're talking to me.
You're muted, Mr. Bartlett.
I don't think he's hearing me.
So, Mr. Brock, that's a road on the Cape. It's spelled INO. I believe. Is that correct, Dean?
I'm sorry, can you just repeat that, Wayne? IYA.
IYANOUGH.
Great, thank you.
That's correct. It's Route 132, if you can hear that.
Great, thank you.
And there's actually two ends.
Oh, sorry about that.
So, okay. Sorry.
Presiding officer, we are back.
Good. Does anyone have anything to say before we go back on the record? Okay, when we go back on the record, who wants to question, Mr. Hazel or Ms. Yellen?
Mr. Hazel, do you have any further questions? Yeah, okay. For him.
We'll let the witnesses clarify where we're headed.
Okay, let's go back on the record. I believe we suspended because there was a need to confer among the witnesses and counsel about a clarification. Does anyone have anything they want to say on the record now?
Yes, I could start off. I believe the discussion was the difference between the anticipated imported fill needed for the original design, which is as stated in T36, the record request T36, which is 56,000 cubic yards. With the revised substation design that reduces the finish grade by approximately 10 feet, the very rough estimate at this stage of material that could be exported from the site would be approximately 2/3 of the amount I just described previously, which is approximately 37,000 cubic yards. But that is a very rough number. And as we've stated earlier, the goal of the design is to continue to refine it and reduce the material that would be exported, and that we would have a further refinement of the substation that would more accurately characterize any material that would be exported from the site.
And is the company able to provide its expectation for the number of truck trips associated with exporting 37,000 cubic yards of fill?
I'll just say that the mathematical answer is 2,100 trips, Mr. Hazel. But as pointed out, this quantity has to be refined, and as the EPC contractors come on board and refine, they're going to be driven to keeping the costs down as much as possible. And trucking does cost money, so they will do everything in their power to try and have a net import-export zero, as close to that as they can. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that would be the motivation that they would try to achieve, at least in terms of import-export. But the revised estimate, as you correctly pointed out, is an export.
Yeah. I'd like to issue a record request for two maps. The first map would be if the company needs to import fill to the substation site, showing the route that trucks would likely take to reach the site. And that could be from, starting on Route 6 or wherever the company thinks an appropriate starting point would be. The second map being if the company is exporting fill from the site, what route would dump trucks take to take fill off of the substation property? And I'll leave it up to the company to figure out what the likely or appropriate endpoints of fill would be.
Okay, let me just take a look here. I think that's, I think last record request we had was 41, and so this will be 42. Does anyone have, but I don't want to make a mistake. Mr. Brock, can you look at your transcript? Do you know if the last one was 41 or 42? I think this one is record request RR-EFSB-42.
That is consistent with my count as well.
Okay. All right, I guess we're all set then. Thank you, Mr. Lang. We're all set. So RR-EFSB-42. Who wants to resume questioning?
Can the company describe a little bit about if the dump trucks are on site, how would they be prohibited from idling on site while they wait to unload or depart, should there be a need to bring fill onto the site?
It's Ms. Yellen, that will be a function of the agreement that Vineyard Wind has with the contractors. I believe there is a Mass DEP standard for that. Offhand, I want to say 15 minutes maximum, but I don't want to be held to that. But I believe there was a standard that does apply for idling of trucks and so on. I believe that Vineyard Wind I don't want to speak out of turn. I'll let Jack and Chris chime in, but I'm guessing they'll want to minimize any air pollution impacts associated with that and try to keep it to a practical minimum in terms of the amount of time that they're idling.
And you mentioned that it's part of the contract. But how is it, you know, something that Vineyard Wind sees as something necessary to enforce or manage and track in some way? How does, I understand that the company, you know, 15 minutes might be the maximum, but how is that actually managed?
Yeah. Again, I'll defer to Jack or Chris, but I do know that the company takes it very seriously. They intend to have environmental monitor during construction, and perhaps more than one, both monitoring activity along the duct bank route and at the substation. So they have the ability, and I think the willingness to monitor these things on their behalf, and so that their contractors are complying with their contract.
I might add, I can refer you to the DEIR under section 10.7 and 10.7.1 in particular. It speaks to the Mass DEP air pollution control regulations and things related to idling times. So there is a Massachusetts regulation that needs to be complied with by the project, and all of that will be pushed down to our contractors to make sure they adhere strictly to all of those regulations. And that is built into all of our contractual agreements with our contractors.
And when I suppose there are several reasons, you know, there are several reasons why having trucks idle on site are, you know, create challenges, such as you mentioned, you know, dust, and there are others, but to control the dust, to control dust measures, dust control measures, what would that look like, and how is that going to be employed during the substation construction?
Well, I'll speak generally to any construction site. There are several measures for dust control, and it usually falls under the category of erosion and sedimentation control. And there'll need to be an erosion and sedimentation control plan for that site. And that is very specific. There, for example, they'll have a bed of stone at the entrance and exits, or if there's just one at the entrance exit combined, that will track out any mud or sediment will drop out. They can even go so far as to have a washing station, truck washing station. When they're engaged in major trucking efforts, that's very typical to have trucks being washed before they go back out on the road. There is availability of a water truck on site that can distribute water. It literally sprays it out the back of the truck onto the traveled ways at the site. And they can also use calcium chloride, which is a way of, it attracts moisture from the air and causes any sandy sites or silty sites to sort of track and not get dusty. So I'm just pointing out several options that the contractors will have, and all of these are probably likely to be employed.
Thank you. Okay. That's all my questions for this topic.
I have one or two quick follow-up questions before Mr. Bartlett has to go. And I apologize if this is already on the record, but are there any seasonal restrictions to importing or exporting fill to the substation site?
I'm not aware of seasonal restrictions on importing or exporting fill to and from the site. the only thing I would add is as you get into the tourist season, or what would be the time of year restriction for in-road work, you could run into some more restrictions put on you by the local police department or DPW if they see it impacting any traffic. But that, as Mr. Bartlett spoke to earlier, it's a living document, and the traffic management process will be a continual dialogue with the town and the town agencies. So that would be worked out as things progress. But it was also mentioned that we have such a direct route to the site from the major, from Route 6, that there's not a lot of time that's spent on some of the, inter roadways within the town.
Thank you. I'm all set for today on traffic.
Okay, can we go off the record for a second? Mr. Bartlett, I believe we had reserved you until 12. We may be able to let you go 13 minutes early. Does anyone have anything? Is there any, do you have, I should say, is there any redirect for Mr. Bartlett?
We may have something be helpful to confer for a minute. I'm not seeing any other parties who might do a cross-examination.
Hey, do you want to confer off the record for a minute, and you can tell me if you have any redirect? Why don't we go off the record for a minute, and you can tell me.
We already are off the record.
Okay. Hello? Yes.
So presiding officer, I believe we're back. We do not intend to do any redirect, and I can put that on the record if you want to go back on, if that's helpful, or if there's anything else to discuss first.
Then, all right, so well, no redirect. We put that on the record. Is this a good time to break for lunch, or are we close to the very end of the session?
I think we might be finished today.
Okay, why don't we go back on the record? We conferred off the record, and there's no redirect for Mr. Bartlett. I know he has to leave at noon, so I'll let you go. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. It's a pleasure. Have a nice day.
Thank you. I will go off the record for a second. Mr. Hazel, you think we're done for the day? Does anyone else have questions or anything they want to raise? Okay, so
I don't have anything substantive. I do want to just make sure we're all on the same page. I know we discussed it this morning, but that on Friday, we will start in the morning with the zoning panel. And
let's go on the record for this. Okay.
Okay.
All right, we're back on the record. We are ready to conclude for the day, but we're going to have a few procedural matters put on the record first. So, Mr. Gerson.
I would just like to confirm, my understanding is that the current schedule is that we will return on Friday at 10 a.m. We will begin with zoning, and that when the zoning panel is concluded, we will move on to magnetic fields. And that currently, when we conclude with magnetic fields, we do not have additional topics, and we do not have a need at this time to have hearings either on Monday or Wednesday next week.
That's correct, yeah.
So we have no hearings on Monday or Wednesday of next week. We do have a hearing on Friday. I'm glad we got that on the record. Does anyone else have any matters they want to raise? All right, seeing none, thank you all for being here. Either I will see you on Friday or Donna Sharkey may be back. But in any case, as I mentioned before, if you're filing, I don't know how long Ms. Sharkey will be. Let me go off the record. I don't know how long Ms. Sharkey will be out, but if you're filing any documents just for the present time, please copy me on them and it's robert.j.shay@mass.gov. And because I don't know if I'll be participating in ruling on any outstanding motions or not. So with that, we'll conclude for the day. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Shea, for pinch hitting and keeping things moving on schedule. And thank you to the siting board for making sure that could happen. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Thank you, gentlemen, ladies.
See you Friday. Take care.